She's not the type to manage an estate. That's what Adrienne told the room when Neville Calloway asked if anyone had questions about the distribution. My name is Jenny Passarelli, 29 years old, and I was sitting 4 feet away when my sister used those 9 words to seal a will that handed her everything. $2.3 million. Grandpa Bruno's 1962 Packard. His savings, his investments, his name on every account. What I received was a brass key, a laminated tag reading Cabin, Augusta County, and her voice following me to the elevator. Enjoy that old shack. I work as a paralegal. I knew every procedural move she'd made before I finished reading the document. But I also knew something she didn't. Grandpa Bruno had been preparing for this moment for 6 years, and the cabin was where he'd hidden the proof. I arrived at Calloway and Pierce 10 minutes early. The firm occupied the 4th floor of a building on Main Street in Charlottesville. The kind of building where the lobby smells like lemon polish and old carpet, where the elevator moves slowly enough to make you aware of every floor you pass. The receptionist asked my name, wrote it on a visitor card, and told me to take a seat. The conference room was visible through a glass panel in the waiting area. Adrienne was already inside. She sat at the walnut table with Fletcher beside her, Fletcher Drummond, her husband, who owned 3 commercial properties in the Shenandoah Valley, and spoke in the measured cadence of someone who had never needed to rush. Neville Calloway was at the head of the table, and they were talking the way people talk when they already know each other. Not formally. Not the way you talk to a lawyer whose office you've entered twice in your life. The way you talk to someone who has already confirmed the result. I watched through the glass. Fletcher made a point. Calloway nodded, wrote something on a notepad, nodded again. Adrienne's posture was the posture of someone sitting at a table she owns. Patrice Holden came in behind me, Adrienne's closest friend. She had been introduced to me 6 years earlier at a Christmas dinner I was not supposed to attend. She carried a thin folder and did not make eye contact with anyone in the waiting area. When the receptionist brought me in, Adrienne said, "Oh, you made it. We were worried about the drive." I sat down. There were 2 sets of documents on the table. One in front of Adrienne, one in front of Calloway. Nothing in front of me. Neville Calloway was 62, I estimated. Silver gray hair, a suit that fit well without announcing itself. He had the practiced stillness of someone accustomed to delivering news that changes the shape of a family. He opened his folder without hurrying. He asked if everyone was present. Everyone was present. He asked if anyone had questions before he began. No one asked questions. He began. The estate of Bruno Passarelli, deceased September 1st, 2025, aged 82. Total assessed value at time of death, $2,312,400. I noted the notary date on the document Calloway slid toward the center of the table. March 2025, 6 months before Grandpa Bruno died. And the previous will, the one I had known about, the one he had mentioned once in passing, had been signed in 2018. Something had changed between 2018 and March of this year. I did not know what, but I noted the date. Calloway read the distribution. The house on Maple Crest Drive, assessed value $890,000. To Adrienne Passarelli Drummond. Fletcher made a small, satisfied movement with his hand. Not a gesture exactly. More like the release of something already held. The joint savings accounts. Combined balance approximately $410,000. To Adrienne Passarelli Drummond. The investment portfolio managed through Charlottesville Capital Group. Current value $682,000. To Adrienne Passarelli Drummond. The 1962 Packard Hawk. Restored, currently garaged at the Maple Crest property. Estimated value $85,000. To Adrienne Passarelli Drummond. Personal property, household goods, jewelry, and family heirlooms. To Adrienne Passarelli Drummond. Adrienne looked at no one in particular. She was composed the way furniture is composed, solid, arranged, occupying exactly the space she had been placed to occupy. Each time Calloway read a clause, Patrice Holden made a small mark on her notepad. I did not understand what she was marking. I understood the function she was serving. She was there to make the room feel like it contained neutral witnesses. Calloway turned to the final page. He read it in the same flat register he had used for all the others. To my granddaughter, Eugenia Jenny Passarelli, I leave the cabin property located in Augusta County, Virginia, and all personal effects therein, to be accessed by the key held in escrow at this office. He produced a small envelope. He placed it on the table in front of me. I opened it. A brass key on a faded silver ribbon. A handwritten tag, his handwriting, the dark blue ink of the Parker pen he had carried for 30 years, reading, Cabin, Augusta County. Adrienne looked at it. She looked at me. She smiled in the way she had smiled at things her entire life that she had already decided were beneath consideration. Enjoy that old shack, Jenny. Grandpa always said you loved it out there, Fletcher added with the particular generosity of a man who knows he has already won. You're getting the sentimental piece. That's what matters, right? Patrice Holden nodded. Calloway asked if there were any questions. Adrienne said there were not. I said nothing. Calloway thanked everyone for their time. I was a paralegal. I had read the entire will in 40 seconds and found 3 things that did not add up. The first was the notary date. A will revised 6 months before death, in the same month as Bruno's first documented hospitalization. Drafted by the attorney my sister had apparently been meeting with well before any of us had reason to meet with attorneys. The second was the language around the cabin parcel. The phrasing was specific. The cabin property located in Augusta County, but it named only the parcel, not the surrounding land. In my work, I had seen that kind of precision used 2 ways: by people who were being careful about what they included, and by people who were being careful about what they left out. The third was the key itself. When something is held in escrow at this office and retrieved at a will reading, there is a chain of handling behind it. The key had not been found in a drawer. Someone had brought it to Calloway and Pierce and left it there deliberately, with a set of instructions I had not been shown. I followed Adrienne and Fletcher into the hallway. Through the glass behind me, I watched Calloway and Adrienne shake hands. Not the handshake of the just concluded, the handshake of the already finished. Fletcher said something I couldn't hear, and Calloway smiled, the small contained smile of someone whose invoice would be paid on time. I took the elevator down alone. In the parking lot, I stood beside my car and looked at the key in my palm. The ribbon was faded, pale silver rubbed soft by handling. But the ink on the tag was dark. Fresh, dark. That ink had not been sitting in a drawer for years. Grandpa Bruno had handed this to someone recently. He had never done anything without a reason. He was a stonemason. He had spent 40 years placing individual stones in specific positions because he understood that a wall is only as strong as its least considered layer. He did not place things carelessly. He did not hand things over carelessly. I remembered something he had said to me when I was 14, on the porch of the cabin, with a topographical map spread between us. The land always tells the truth, Jenny. You just have to know how to read it. I had thought he was talking about geology. I drove home. I did not call anyone. I put the key in my coat pocket, and I thought about the notary date on a will I had never been shown. I went back to work the following Monday. The firm where I worked was small. 3 attorneys, 2 paralegals, a shared printer that jammed regularly. One of the attorneys, who had known me for 4 years, said, "I heard about your grandfather. I'm sorry." I thanked him. That was the extent of it. Adrienne texted on Wednesday. The message was warm in the way a glass of water is warm when it has been sitting on a counter since morning. "Hey, just checking in. Let me know about the cabin. Fletcher has a contact in Staunton who does rural property assessments. Might be useful before you decide anything." I read it. I put my phone face down on my desk. I pulled up the Virginia Code on gift deeds. I was not a lawyer, but I had processed enough real property transfers to know the shape of the question I needed to ask. A gift deed, to be enforceable in Virginia, required delivery and acceptance during the grantor's lifetime. If Bruno had signed a gift deed for the cabin parcel and had not recorded it before his death, the question of validity would turn on whether delivery had occurred. The key held in escrow at Calloway's office might constitute constructive delivery. Or it might not. I didn't know enough yet to know. But I was beginning to suspect I was not supposed to know. Not without going to find it myself. I opened the Augusta County GIS map online. Public-facing, free. I searched parcel 0614-C, 12 acres. Registered to the estate of Bruno Passarelli, 1 structure on site. No recent transfer. Then I zoomed out. The parcel surrounding 0614-C were labeled in a way I had not seen before on that interface. Instead of an individual owner's name, each of them carried the same notation: entity ownership. See clerk records. I sat with that for a moment. Not a person's name, an entity. Something registered in a different system, a business structure, a limited liability company, a trust. Something that existed in a county registry, separate from a standard property name search. I wrote it down: entity ownership. Parcels adjacent to 0614-C. See clerk records. Find out what entity. Find out who controls it. I called the Augusta County Clerk's office that afternoon. That parcel is in the system, the woman who answered told me, but there are adjacent parcels under a different registration. You'd need to come in to pull the full chain of title. Different registration, I said. As in a different filing structure. That's right, come in and we can show you. I hung up. I looked out the window at the parking lot and the tree line beyond it. I had been sitting in a room where my grandfather's entire estate was distributed to my sister, and there were parcels adjacent to the only thing he had left me that were registered to something no one in that room had mentioned. I booked 2 weeks off and started packing. The drive from Charlottesville to the cabin took 4 hours. The last 2.5 miles were a dirt road, narrow, uneven, the kind that makes your car feel like it's asking you a question it already knows the answer to. I had driven it every summer from the time I was 4 until I was 14. I had not driven it in 2 years. The cabin sat at the edge of a clearing backed by Blue Ridge foothills. Grandpa Bruno had built it in 1966, before he was married, before there were children, before there was anything except him and the land, and a plan he had carried across an ocean in his head. He was a stonemason by trade. The walls were fieldstone, local, irregular, fitted without mortar gaps you could pass a blade through. He had not needed help. He had needed time and a standard he was unwilling to lower. I used the brass key to open the front door on September 23rd. Inside, dust on every surface, but not the dust of genuine abandonment. The furniture was draped in cotton sheets, old sheets, but clean. The dishes in the cabinet were stacked properly. The books on the shelf above the fireplace were upright in their places. I ran my finger along a spine. Thin dust. Not 2 years' worth. On the kitchen wall, a paper calendar. August 2025. I stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at it for a long time. Adrienne had told the room at the will reading that the cabin had been empty since 2023. She had said it the way she said everything, cleanly, with the confidence of someone who has never been asked to provide a source. The calendar on the wall was from 2 months ago. 3 dates in the second week of August were marked with red ballpoint pen. The marks were specific, not casual. He had been here in August, 17 days before he died. I called the utility company that afternoon. I asked about the electric account for the property. Account is still active under Bruno Passarelli, the representative said. Payments were current through August. Current through August. I spent the next 8 days cleaning in the methodical way I clean when I am thinking about something else. I swept, I scrubbed, I checked the pipes and found them intact. I tested the lights and found them on. Someone had been maintaining this place, paying the bills, checking the structure, keeping it serviceable for reasons that had nothing to do with sentiment and everything to do with intention. On the 4th and 5th days, I went through the bookshelves. Grandpa Bruno had not been a heavy reader, but what he owned was deliberate. 3 books on Virginia land law, 2 on property surveying, 1 paperback on water rights in the Appalachian Corridor. In the upper corner of the shelf, tucked horizontal on top of the upright volumes, a small notebook with a dark green cover. I did not open it. I set it on the table and kept cleaning. On the 6th and 7th days, I cleaned the fireplace. It was the centerpiece of the cabin, a wide hearth built from the same fieldstone as the walls, which meant it had been here since 1966, placed by his hands in the first year he owned the land. I knew his technique. I had watched him work when I was a child. Every joint was his. On the 8th day, I noticed something. In the lower left corner of the fireplace surround, 1 stone sat at a slightly different angle than the others. Its color was a shade off, not dramatically, but enough to read once you were looking. The mortar around it did not follow the same pattern as the rest of the work. He did not make errors in mortar. He had never made errors in mortar. I pressed it lightly with my palm. It shifted, just enough to confirm it was loose, just enough to confirm it was meant to. I went to bed. I would need better light. I would need a tool. The morning of October 1st, I found a narrow-bladed scraper in the outbuilding behind the cabin, the kind used to clean between stones during pointing work. I brought it inside, positioned myself in front of the fireplace, and worked carefully. The stone came free on the third attempt. Behind it was a cavity approximately 12 inches deep, lined on the interior with pine boards, smooth, sealed, built to resist moisture. This was not a loose stone. This was a compartment. He had constructed it the same way he constructed walls, with purpose, with precision, with the assumption that it would need to hold for decades. Inside the compartment sat a wooden box. I lifted it out. The box was walnut, dark, dense, maybe 12 inches by 8 by 4, and the joinery at the corners was hand-cut. I recognized his work. He had made smaller boxes like this for letters and photographs when I was young. Little things with the same grain and the same weight. This was the same hand, the same finish. On the lower right corner of the box's front face, carved into the wood with an engraving tool, G.P. 1996. G.P. Jenny Passarelli, 1996. The year I was born. I sat down on the stone floor. The morning light came through the east window and fell across my hands. I held the box and did not move for a while. He had made this the year I was born. He had placed it behind a stone he fitted into the fireplace at some point after that. Not in 1966, but later when there was a reason to. He had known, before I could read, before I understood anything about estate law or family dynamics, or the particular shape of betrayal, that there would come a day when he needed to leave me something that could not be taken apart in a conference room. The box had a small lock. I looked at the brass key in my hand. I tried it. It turned. Inside the box, arranged in careful order, a thick white envelope sealed with a small wax stamp in the shape of the letter B. A piece of paper folded into quarters. Thick with what I could see through the fold were hand-drawn lines. A thin manila folder with a handwritten label on the tab. And a business card, paper clipped to a small square of notepaper. I checked my phone. 7:23 in the morning. Outside, nothing but wind and the distant ridgeline. I set the business card aside and read the notepaper first. 2 sentences. Call Ray. He knows everything. The business card. Raymond Cutler, Esquire. Cutler and Waverly. An address on Court Street in Staunton, Virginia. 40 minutes from here. The manila folder's label, in his handwriting, Passarelli Land Holdings. Assignment. I looked at the folded paper, the hand-drawn lines visible through the fold. I looked at the sealed envelope. I picked up the envelope. The wax seal over the flap bore a small impression, a capital B, simply pressed, cleanly made. I broke it carefully and drew out 2 pages of paper, folded together. The handwriting was his, dark blue ink, the heavy-handed script of someone who had learned to write in a different language and adapted to English over decades, without losing the weight of the original. The lines were deliberate. Nothing was crossed out. The first line read, Jenny, if you're reading this, you found the key. Good girl. He began the letter without preamble, the way he did most things. He told me he had known for several years that the end of his life would involve a fight over what he had built. Not because he was a pessimist, but because he had watched his family carefully and understood how each of its members valued things. Adrienne had always counted what she could see. She counted the house, the accounts, the portfolio, the car. She counted well. She had married a man who counted the same way, and together they had become very skilled at ensuring the visible number came out in their favor. When he began to slow down, she had started making arrangements. He had noticed. He had let her make them. He wrote that he could have fought it directly. He could have contested the revision process, involved a different attorney from the beginning, made a case out of what he saw happening. But he was 80 years old and tired in ways that go beyond the body, and more than that, he did not want the last months of his life to be a war. He had come to this country with nothing, had built everything he owned with his hands and his back, and 40 years of careful work, and he did not want to spend the end of it in a conference room arguing over paperwork. So he did what he knew how to do. He built around it. 1 stone at a time, spread over 6 years, in complete silence. I read that paragraph twice. He had begun working with Raymond Cutler in the spring of 2019, a lawyer in Staunton, not Charlottesville, with no connection to Callaway and Pierce, and no reason to appear anywhere near the family's paperwork. Between 2019 and 2022, he had transferred the land surrounding the cabin, 8 parcels in total, numbered 0614-A through J, covering 214 acres of Blue Ridge foothills, into a Virginia limited liability company called Passarelli Land Holdings. Not in a single transfer, in 8 separate deeds, spread across 3 years, each small enough to be unremarkable, each filed quietly in Augusta County without generating attention from anyone who might be watching his estate. He wrote, "The LLC is not part of the estate. It is not subject to the will. It has never been subject to the will. It became yours the moment I signed the assignment. The assignment, the manila folder." He had signed a member assignment transfer in 2023, transferring 100% of the membership interest in Passarelli Land Holdings to me. Notarized by a notary in Staunton, not Charlottesville, not anywhere near Callaway's orbit. He also wrote about the cabin parcel itself, parcel 0614-C. He had signed a gift deed naming me as the recipient. The deed had not been recorded at the Augusta County Clerk's office. He explained why. He had been ill, and then he had been worse, and the recording had not happened before he died. But delivery had occurred. He had given the key to Callaway's office with written instructions that it be handed to me at the will reading. Under Virginia case law, he believed, and Ray had confirmed, that this constituted constructive delivery, sufficient to support the gift deed's validity. Then he turned to what was in the folder alongside the assignment. In 2022, a company called Appalachian Natural Resources Group had approached him about a mineral rights lease. The land beneath his parcels contained natural gas deposits and other subsurface resources the company wanted to access. He had negotiated carefully with Ray over the better part of 3 years. In August of this year, 17 days before he died, he had signed a preliminary agreement expressing his intent to execute the lease. The offer was for a 30-year lease, total value $5.2 million, $1.8 million upfront at signing, the remainder in royalties over the life of the agreement. The offer had a time limit. It was valid for 90 days following his verified passing. He had died on September 1st. 90 days from September 1st was November 30th. It was now October 1st. I had 60 days. He closed the letter this way. He remembered the summers when I was young. He remembered the way I had asked questions about the topographical maps he kept on the porch table. Why the lines curved the way they did. What they were measuring. How you could learn the shape of a hillside from a piece of paper. He said I had always asked the right questions, even when I hadn't known they were the right ones. He wrote, "The land is yours, has been yours. Call Ray by October 15th. I set the letter down on the cabin table. I sat with it for 2 minutes, maybe 3. Then I took out my phone and photographed each page of the letter, the box, the carved initials, the compartment behind the stone, the business card. I opened my notebook to a clean page and drew a table. Document name, contents, required action, deadline. I wrote down everything I knew. I wrote down what I still needed to confirm. 60 days. I had worked with Les. And this time, he had already done most of the work. I picked up the folded paper, the map, and opened it. It was a USGS topographical survey map for Augusta County, photocopied and annotated by hand. His writing was all over it, blue ink, the same pen as the letter, marking parcels with their numbers, connecting them with hand-drawn lines, noting dates in small print beside each one. At the center of the map, circled in red, parcel 0614-C. The cabin. Surrounding it in blue, 8 parcels drawn and labeled 0614-A, 0614-B, 0614-D, 0614-E, 0614-F, 0614-G, 0614-H, 0614-J. Each one bore a date, the date of its transfer into the LLC, and a notation indicating acreage. I added them up on the back page of my notebook. 21, 18, 30, 27, 31, 22, 29, 36. 214 acres total. The cabin sat at the center of all of it like the keystone of an arch. In the lower right corner of the map, in a small box he had drawn by hand, he had written P.L. Holdings, and below that, Mineral Survey, 2022, see Appalachian Report, folder. I opened the manila folder. 3 documents, ordered precisely the way he ordered everything. The first was the Virginia LLC Operating Agreement for Passarelli Land Holdings, dated 2019, with Bruno Passarelli listed as sole member. Attached to it was the Member Assignment Transfer Document, dated July 2023, signed by Bruno, transferring 100% of the membership interest to Eugenia Jenny Passarelli. The notary seal was from a firm in Staunton I did not recognize. Not Callaway's stamp, not anyone from Charlottesville. The second was the gift deed for parcel 0614-C, signed by Bruno, naming me as grantee, notarized. No recording stamp. It had never been filed at the county. But his signature was there, and the notarization was proper. And Ray had already told him the constructive delivery argument would hold. The third document was a letter on Appalachian Natural Resources Group letterhead, addressed to Bruno Passarelli. It outlined the terms of a proposed mineral rights lease for the 214 acres held under Passarelli Land Holdings, LLC, a 30-year agreement, total value $5.2 million, with an upfront payment of $1.8 million upon execution. The offer included a clause, valid for 90 days following grantor's verified passing, provided that authorized representative of the above-named LLC presents executed acceptance within said period. At the bottom of the letter, Bruno had initialed it. The date beside his initials, August 15, 2025. August 15th. I looked up at the kitchen wall, the paper calendar, August 2025. The dates marked in red in the second week of August. The 15th was one of them. He had been sitting in this kitchen on August 15th, signing a mineral lease that would transfer $5.2 million to his granddaughter after his death, while the attorney he had hired for his official estate had no idea the LLC existed. I took a breath. Then I called the number on Raymond Cutler's business card. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Cutler, my name is Jenny Passarelli. I'm Bruno Passarelli's granddaughter. I found the box. A pause. Then, he said you'd call in October. He said, and I'm quoting him directly, Ray, Jenny will find the box by day 10. She always paid attention. A beat. He was right about the timeline, wasn't he? It was day 9. Close enough, I said. Ray Cutler explained what I needed to know in the precise, measured way that good lawyers explain things. Without condescension, without ornamentation, with the assumption that the person on the other end is capable of following a logical sequence. The LLC transfers were clean. 8 deeds, all properly filed at Augusta County between 2019 and 2022. The entity existed independently of the estate. It was not subject to probate. It was not listed in the will, because it had never been part of the estate to list. The gift deed was more complicated. It had not been recorded, which created an ambiguity. But Ray had researched the applicable Virginia case law and believed the argument for constructive delivery was solid. Bruno had given the key to Callaway's office with a written instruction that it be handed to me at the will reading. That chain, signed instruction, held in escrow, delivered to the intended grantee, met the standard for constructive delivery under prior Virginia decisions. It was defensible. Better to record it now than to leave it open. Get to the Augusta County Clerk's office today if you can, he said. File the deed, pay the stamp tax. Once it's recorded, the constructive delivery argument becomes academic. I told him I understood. Then I asked if there was anything else I should request when I arrived. Ray paused in a way that had something deliberate behind it. Ask them to show you any pending transfer requests filed on the property in the last 30 days. There was one filed 11 days ago. You should see it before you do anything else. What is it? I'll let the clerk tell you. It'll mean more coming from the record. I thanked him and ended the call. I looked at the map on the table, the folder, the letter, the box. I thought about Adrienne saying the cabin had been empty since 2023, standing in a room where she had arranged for a lawyer to receive $15,000 for a process she had already guided to its conclusion. I thought about the calendar on the kitchen wall. I thought about the stone she had never thought to look behind. I got in my car. The Augusta County Clerk's office was in Staunton, 40 minutes up the valley. I arrived just after 2 in the afternoon. The building was a county government building in the way that county government buildings always are. Functional, slightly underfunded, staffed by people who understood the material better than the building suggested. I asked for the chain of title on parcel 0614-C and all adjacent parcels. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, pulled up the records. She confirmed what I already knew. 0614-C was registered to the estate of Bruno Passarelli, no transfer on record. But when she pulled the adjacent parcels, she turned her monitor toward me without comment. Parcels 0614-A, B, D, E, F, G, H, and J, all of them. Passarelli Land Holdings, LLC, a Virginia limited liability company. Transfer dates ranging from March 2019 through November 2022. All properly recorded, all clean. I'd like to record a deed, I said. I produced the gift deed from the folder. She reviewed it. She checked the notarization. She typed. She asked for identification. I provided it. She stamped the deed and issued a receipt. That's recorded, she said. Deed stamp, tax paid. You're on the books for parcel 0614-C as of today, October 1st. She slid the stamped copy toward me, along with the receipt. Recording receipt R-2025-4892. Thank you. And the LLC parcels. Ownership confirmed? Passarelli Land Holdings, all confirmed. Recorded clean. I also need to see any pending transfer requests on the property. My attorney said there was something filed 11 days ago. She looked at the screen. She navigated to a different section of the filing system. She found it. She turned the monitor toward me. It was a quiet title action. Filed September 22, 2025, 7 days after the will reading. Petitioner: Adrienne Passarelli Drummond. Attorney of record: Neville Callaway, Callaway and Pierce. The action requested that the Augusta County Circuit Court formally confirm that parcel 0614-C was part of Bruno Passarelli's estate, and therefore subject to the will's distribution. To Adrienne. I read the document carefully. The quiet title action named parcel 0614-C, only 0614-C. There was no mention of the adjacent parcels, no mention of Passarelli Land Holdings, no mention of an LLC at all. She had filed to take the cabin, just the cabin. She had no idea what surrounded it. At the bottom of the quiet title filing, Callaway had signed a certification. I certify that I have conducted a full title search of the subject parcel and all adjacent properties. He had found nothing. A full title search, certified by a licensed attorney, and he had found nothing about the entity that owned 214 acres around the property he was attempting to claim. I understood exactly why. He had searched by grantor name. Bruno Passarelli. The LLC parcels were not in Bruno Passarelli's name. They were filed under an entity, in a different registration, visible only if you searched for the entity itself or pulled the adjacent parcel numbers individually. In rural title work, it was a basic but not uncommon error, and it meant that every legal argument Callaway was preparing was built on a foundation that did not account for 214 acres, a 30-year mineral lease, and $1.8 million in upfront payment. I took a photocopy of the quiet title filing. I thanked the clerk. I walked to the parking lot. Then I called Ray. I've recorded the deed, I said. Receipt R-20254892, and I've seen the quiet title action. Good, a brief pause. He searched by name. That's what it looks like. Callaway made a basic error, Ray said. Searched by grantor name, not entity. It happens in rural title work more than it should. But it means he handed you the narrative. Another pause. I'll file a motion to dismiss this afternoon. With the deed now recorded, the constructive delivery argument isn't just tenable. It's the only reading of the evidence. He'll know that within the week. How long before he withdraws? 30 days, maybe less. He has no case. He certified a title search that didn't find the entity. That certification is now directly contradicted by the LLC filings. He has no path forward. I looked out at the ridgeline. The late afternoon light was flat and even. "Ray," I hesitated. "Did my grandfather know she would come for the cabin?" A pause. Considered. He said, and I'm quoting, "Adrienne will come for the cabin because it's the only thing she can see. That's always been her limitation." I sat with that on the drive back. 2 days later, on October 3rd, I drove to Staunton to meet Ray in person. Cutler and Waverly occupied a second-floor office on Court Street, directly across from the Augusta County Courthouse. The building was older than Callaway and Pierce, the furniture more worn, the bookshelves more densely packed. Ray Cutler was 65, I estimated. White hair, a firm handshake, the particular stillness of someone accustomed to rooms where the stakes were real. On his desk, a bound set of documents more than an inch thick. The original LLC filing, every deed, the member assignment, the Appalachian correspondence, the gift deed, copies of all recording confirmations. Everything he had been holding for 6 years, waiting for this meeting. "Your grandfather came to me in the spring of 2019, Ray said. He gestured to the chair across his desk. He sat right there and told me he needed to build something that couldn't be taken apart in a conference room. He spread his hands. That's exactly what we built." I signed the member assignment acceptance form, notarized on the spot. As of that signature, I was the controlling member of Passarelli Land Holdings, LLC, a Virginia limited liability company holding 214 acres of Augusta County, with a pending mineral lease offer worth $5.2 million. Ray drafted and signed a letter to Appalachian Natural Resources Group, confirming the entity's authorized representative. He filed the motion to dismiss the quiet title action that afternoon. 5 days later, on October 8th, I received an email from Dale Forsyth, Vice President of Land Acquisitions at Appalachian Natural Resources Group. It confirmed my status as authorized representative of the LLC. It expressed condolences for Bruno's passing. It requested that we schedule a meeting to review the final lease terms. It was professional, precise, and formal in the way that $5.2 million arrangements tend to be. 53 days remained on the offer window. I replied that I would confirm a meeting date before October 20th. 3 hours later, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Jenny." Adrienne's voice, measured, not warm. She had received notice of the motion to dismiss. She had read enough of it to understand that something had happened that she did not yet understand. She wanted to know about what she called the LLC situation. She asked who Raymond Cutler was. She told me Callaway would be looking into everything. I let her finish. "The deed is recorded, Adrienne," I said. "Parcel 0614-C is in my name as of October 1st. The LLC is a separate entity. It was never part of the estate, and it's not subject to the will. If you want to discuss any of this further, you can contact Ray Cutler directly." A pause. "I don't know what you think you found," she said, "but none of this changes what Grandpa intended." "What Grandpa intended," I said, "is exactly what's happening. You should read the LLC documents before you call Callaway again. It'll save him some billable hours." I ended the call. 2 days after that, Ray called me. "Callaway reached out this morning," he said. "He asked for a 2-week extension on the quiet title withdrawal." I said no. "What did he say?" "He said he needed time to review the entity structure." A pause. "He's going to drop it, Jenny. He knows he doesn't have a case. The deed is recorded, the delivery argument is documented, and his title search certification is contradicted by the LLC filings he didn't find. He has no path forward." "Okay," I said. "Okay," he agreed. On October 20th, I drove back to Staunton with Ray. Dale Forsyth met us in a conference room in Appalachian's regional office. Not a large room, not a theatrical one. The kind of room where things get decided without announcement. Forsyth was in his late 40s, direct, the kind of person whose attention felt like a resource being carefully allocated. He had a copy of the proposed lease on the table. Ray had reviewed it in advance. We spent 2 hours on the language. Ray negotiated 3 changes: stronger surface access restrictions protecting the cabin site and the upper ridgeline from operational disturbance, more specific reclamation requirements for any access roads constructed during extraction, and a clearer definition of the monitoring boundary around the cabin's immediate footprint. Forsyth agreed to all 3. The changes were documented in a rider attached to the main lease. At the end of the meeting, I signed. Your grandfather was one of the more thoughtful landowners we've worked with, Forsyth said, as he closed his copy of the documents. He understood what the land was worth, and what was worth keeping. He always said the land tells the truth, I said. Forsyth nodded, then he said, There's one thing I wanted to mention for your awareness. Back in August, before he passed, we reached out to Callaway and Pierce, standard practice for us when a principal is in declining health, just to determine whether there was legal representation we should be coordinating with. I waited. They told us they weren't aware of any mineral interest on the estate, he said. They said the property in question was a small cabin parcel of no significant assessed value. The room was quiet. Callaway's office told you there was no mineral interest, I said. Yes. In August, 2 weeks before my grandfather died. Correct. Thank you for telling me that. I said nothing more about it in that room. 2 days later, on October 22nd, I received an email from Ray. The subject line was 7 words. Callaway withdrew the quiet title this morning. Full withdrawal, no conditions. The reason given in the filing. Grantor's prior delivery of deed to subject parcel extinguishes estate claim. Dry language, accurate language. The kind of language that cannot be argued with, because it has already described reality. I printed the withdrawal confirmation. I placed it on the table beside the photocopy of the quiet title action Adrian had filed on September 22nd. 2 pieces of paper, 37 days between them. That was all the time it had taken to dismantle 6 months of preparation. Ray added a note to the email, Callaway's conduct, acting as both the drafting attorney for the revised will and as Adrian's attorney of record in the quiet title action, may constitute a conflict of interest worth reporting to the Virginia State Bar. That is entirely your decision. I am flagging it so you have the option. I wrote it in my notebook. I would decide later. 3 days after that, on October 25th, Adrian sent me a long email. It was written in the language of family reconciliation. It spoke of what Grandpa would have wanted. It emphasized moving forward together. Toward the end, it made an offer. She was prepared to pay $800,000 for a 50% membership interest in Passarelli Land Holdings, LLC. She had done the math. She understood now what she had missed. She had calculated a number, put it in professional language, and sent it to me as though the question were still open. I read it once, to the end. Then I forwarded it to Ray with 4 words, for your records. I did not reply to Adrian, not because I was angry. I was not especially angry. I was a paralegal who had spent 6 weeks working through a legal structure her grandfather had built over 6 years, and it had worked exactly the way he designed it to work, and the result was what he had intended it to be. There was nothing left in the situation that required my voice. Adrienne had taken what she could see. She had done it well and legally and with considerable preparation, but she had looked at the brass key in my hand and called it worthless. And in doing so, she had told me, and the room and the record, exactly where her knowledge ended. In early November, $1.8 million was transferred into the Passarelli Land Holdings, LLC account. The lease was recorded at Augusta County. Ray filed the Virginia State Bar complaint regarding Callaway's conduct. The investigation would take time, and I did not know what the outcome would be, and I found that I did not need to know. I contacted an architectural preservation firm about the cabin, not to renovate it, to document it and stabilize what needed stabilizing without changing what did not. The stone walls were in good condition. They had been built by someone who knew how to build for permanence, but the kitchen window had a soft lintel, and one of the outbuilding's roof timbers had started to give. I wanted those things addressed without altering anything else. Every stone where he put it. That was the instruction I gave the preservation architect when she asked about my goals. In mid-November, I drove back to the cabin alone. I brought the letter. I sat on the porch in the afternoon. The Blue Ridge was in full autumn color, rust and amber and a dark olive green that held the ridgeline firm against the sky. I had sat on this porch in every season of my childhood, and in each of them it had looked like a different version of the same place, except that the place itself never changed. Only the light changed. The stones never moved. I thought about a summer morning when I was 8 years old. Grandpa Bruno had unfolded a topographical map on this same table and smoothed it flat with both hands. He had pointed to the contour lines, the curved, close-set lines that showed where the hillside was steep. "See these lines, Jenny? Every line is a story. You just have to read them slowly." I had asked what kind of story. He thought about it. "The story of what's underneath," he said. I had thought he was talking about the geology, the layers of sediment and stone pressed into form over millions of years until the land arrived at the shape it held today. He was not only talking about the geology. He had spent his working life building things that were meant to outlast him. Walls, structures, the cabin itself. He had understood from early on that the things that endure are the things built in layers, not the ones that announce themselves, but the ones that hold because every component has been placed with care. He had built the LLC the same way. 8 parcels, 8 deeds, 3 years, a lawyer in Staunton, complete silence. He had built the assignment into the structure in the same year he had written the letter and locked the box behind the stone. He had prepared for the precise scenario that had played out in Calloway's conference room, and he had done it quietly, without telling anyone who did not need to know. And he had been right about me. That was the part I had to sit with. He had known I would find the box. He had told Ray I would find it within 10 days. He had known I was a paralegal, that I would understand what the documents meant, that I would go to the source, the land itself, the records, the actual chain of evidence, rather than argue in a room where the outcome had been arranged before I arrived. He had seen those things in me for 20 years, in the summers when I was 8 and 10 and 12, and asking questions about lines on a map. He had seen me long before I had seen myself clearly. The will had given Adrienne what he owed her: the house, the accounts, the car, the investments, things he had built during years she had been present for, years when she had been a daughter to him in the ways that daughters are daughters. He had given her what he owed. He had been fair in the way that wills try to be fair, according to the visible record. The box had given me what he chose. I had spent my adult life not quite sure whether I was the kind of person who could manage something important when it fell to me. Not sure whether my competence was real or just the performance of it. He had answered that question 6 years before I thought to ask it, had built the answer into a legal structure that would survive him, survive the conference room, survive Adrienne's $15,000 lawyer and Calloway's incomplete title search, and every arrangement made while Bruno Passarelli was lying in a hospital bed in February of last year. I set the letter on the porch table. The brass key was still in my coat pocket. I took it out and placed it on the table next to the letter. It had opened the front door of the cabin on the morning I arrived. It had opened the box behind the stone on day 9. It had done what he designed it to do. 2 locks, 1 key, 1 plan, built over 29 years that began the year I was born, and ended in a county clerk's office on October 1st, with a receipt numbered R-2025-4892, and a stamp tax paid, and a deed that said, in the dry official language of recorded property, that the land was mine. The probate notification had come in November. The estate of Bruno Passarelli formally settled. Total value, $2,312,400. That was what the estate had contained. It did not include 214 acres of Blue Ridge foothills. It did not include a 30-year mineral rights lease. It did not include the box, or the letter, or the map, or the 6 years of careful, layered, silent preparation that had preceded all of it. Those things had never been part of the estate. They had always been mine. The key is still on that porch table. The cabin is still standing, every stone where he put it. And I understand now what he was telling me all those summers ago, spread out over a topographical map with a cup of bad coffee between us. The land always tells the truth. He just needed me to be the one to listen.